Sorry, I think there was an internet issue. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Sorry about that. So, hi everyone, welcome again, and welcome to today's webinar. And before we jump right into the webinar, I would like to introduce our platform, Positivity. So, Positivity is a Singapore headquartered mental health organization, and we are committed to making quality mental health care accessible and affordable for everyone. And our aim is to connect individuals with the right experts on our platform while creating awareness around different and important mental health topics. Speaking of such one of those topics, we are here to discuss today the psychology of appreciation and why expressing gratitude every day can improve your relationship with self and others. So, in our everyday lives, we often underestimate the power of appreciation and gratitude. So, today, this webinar will explore that. And we are very delighted to have Ms. Simran Sakshi today. So, she is a psychologist who works, primarily with emotionally focused individual therapy, and her approach is rooted in uh, attachment theory and nervous system regulation and relationship healing. So we are very delighted to have Simran with us today. And without any further ado, let's begin today's webinar. Over to you, Simran.
Thank you. Thank you, Shreya, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'll just be sharing the screen. Please give me a moment. Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay. Okay. All right. So like Shreya said, today we are going to talk about some about psychology of appreciation. And I know when you think about appreciation or when you hear the word appreciation, it sounds something very simple, right? Appreciation, gratitude, sounds like very simple things. But I think that it is actually much more nuanced and far more powerful than it actually gets credit for. So, in this webinar, we are not going to talk about gratitude journals or listing three things that you're thankful for every morning. I mean, of course, those things have their own place. But today, we are just going to go a little deeper than that. We are going to talk about what appreciation actually does. Okay, what it does to your brain, to your relationships, to yourself, and how you relate to yourself, right? And we are going to talk about how particularly self appreciation is more harder than it sounds, and what to do when it feels out of reach. So yeah, let's get started. And if something lands for you, you can type it in the chat. And if you would rather just sit quietly with this, that's also completely fine. Okay, let's begin. All right. So I want to start with something that I would like you to sit with for a moment. Um, think about the last time when someone did something that you genuinely appreciated. Okay, maybe a colleague who covered for you without being asked, or a friend who remembered something that you mentioned in passing, or maybe a partner who did something small but very thoughtful, or could be that your parents were checking in with you at the right moment, right? So, did you tell them this? Did you tell them that you appreciated this? And not in a very, vague or very general way, like, yeah, thank you so much, or just thank you. But actually told them, like, this specific thing you did, it meant something to me. And I know for most of us, the honest answer will probably be that not always, right? Sometimes not at all, as in, like, we feel it, we probably register it, we are thankful for it, but then we move on, right? Assuming that perhaps, uh, sorry, is there a chat? Okay. Yeah. So we assume that, that it goes without saying, or simply sometimes the moment just passes before we find the words, right? That also happens. So anything like this, and usually this is what happens. This is normally how we treat or think of appreciation. Yes, we feel grateful about it, but it's very rare that we actually say it out loud. But now think about the last time when something bothered you. Okay, the last time when someone did something that frustrated you or fell short of what you needed. Now, did you say that? Maybe a lot of you did, and often this happens much more readily, much more automatically, in fact. And that is not a character flaw, okay? It's not ingratitude, it's not selfishness. It is something much more fundamental about how our brains are wired, in fact. And today we are going into the neuroscience of that in a moment. But before that, I want to just name the gap first, because this is important to see this clearly before we talk about what to do of it, right? We notice more than we say, we notice more than we express. We feel more warmth, more gratitude, more genuine appreciation than we express. And that gap between what we feel versus what we voice, that gap has a cost. Okay. It is a very quiet cumulative cost, but it's something that probably affects our relationships, probably affects how people around us feel seen, and also how we relate to ourselves. So today is about starting to close that gap. Okay. Now let's look at this beautiful experiment which was conducted by Dr. Masaru Emoto with water. So what he did was he exposed water to different words, music, intentions. So like positive words like love and gratitude, as well as negative words like hatred and worthlessness. Now after that, he froze the water and photographed the crystals that formed. Okay. The photographs that came out were remarkable. Water that was exposed to positive words, they formed very, symmetrical, intricate, very beautiful crystals. But what happened to water that was exposed to negative words? They formed kind of, irregular, incoherent, and very fragmented structures. Okay, and let's not go into those findings because they were not very hard scientific proof, because the methodology itself had some criticism and had some gaps. But what I'm trying to show here or talk about here is that living things respond to the quality of what they are consistently exposed to. And this also can be seen with another experiment that was conducted by IKEA. It was called Bully a Plant project. In this project, what IKEA did was it took two identical plants and placed them in schools over several countries and had students speak to them every day for 30 days, right? So one of the plants received compliments and encouragement, but the other plant received insults and criticism. Both of the plants had identical soil, identical water, identical sunlight, right? At the end of 30 days, what happened was that the bullied plant had visibly wilted. Okay. Whereas the plant that was, praised, it was thriving. Yeah. Now, of course, we are not water and we are not plants, right? But in fact, we are much more, infinitely more complex beings, right? And we have cognition, we have resilience, we also have context. We can also rationalize things, we can also reframe things. So just think about this, that if a plant can respond very visibly and very measurably to the words that it is given, what do you think might be happening to a human being who primarily receives criticism? or someone who only gives themselves or primarily gives themselves criticism, or someone who lives in a relational environment where what is wrong is named much more than what is right. Yeah. And that is what we are really asking, what actually happens to people who are dealing with criticism more than they get appreciated for. So neuroscience gives us part of that answer. Let's now look at that. So what happens to our brain when it receives appreciation? Okay. The first thing to understand here is that there is a negativity bias. Okay. So your brain is wired. It is evolutionary wired. Okay. To pay more attention to negative experiences rather than positive ones. So to register threat faster than safety, right? To hold on to criticism longer than praise. And it is not, again, not a personality trait or, a sign that something is wrong with you. It is just a survival mechanism. Okay, it's something that has been built in over hundreds of thousands of years. The brain that was able to notice the predator survived, and the brain who was not able to notice and lingered on beautiful sunsets did not always survive. Okay, that was how it was years and years ago. But right now, the problem is that we are not living in that scenario anymore. We are not living in, savannas, and, we are not exposed to threats all the time, right? But the wiring remains. And what it means is that criticism lands faster, cuts deeper, and stays longer than appreciation does. Okay. But appreciation, by contrast, it requires more active and repeated effort to register and retain. So this is why when you receive, 9 pieces of positive feedback and 1 piece of criticism, what you remember is the criticism. Okay. And it's just neuroscience. This is how it is. Okay. That's one piece of how our brains are wired, first of all. Right. Now, looking at what appreciation, giving or receiving appreciation does to your brain. So, when someone genuinely feels, authentically feels seen or heard and, appreciated, what happens is their brain releases oxytocin, which is also called the bonding, right? So, it creates a sense of warmth, of safety, of connection, and it just changes the whole neurochemical environment of that interaction. And what is interesting here is not just the brain of the person who's receiving the appreciation, but the brain of the person who's expressing that appreciation has benefits. Okay, because when you express gratitude, it activates your medial prefrontal cortex, which is an area which is associated with positive emotion, moral reasoning, and learning. So, when you express appreciation, yes, you're being generous, but it is also very neurologically rewarding for the person who is doing it, right? So, whether you receive appreciation or you give appreciation, you benefit. Okay. Thirdly, there is the reinforcement loop. So, when a behavior gets noticed and named, it is more likely to happen again. So, say, you have a colleague whose attention to detail you call out explicitly. That person is more likely to bring that same level of attention to detail in the next project as well. A partner whose thoughtfulness you name is more likely to keep being thoughtful. And this is not because they are performing for you, but because being seen for something activates motivation in a way that invisibility never can. Okay. It's simply how human beings respond to mattering. Yeah. So this is how our brains are wired, and what appreciation and gratitude can do to your brain. Now moving on. Let's try to understand this in a relational context. So, because a lot of people, a lot of times where people feel gratitude and appreciation most immediately is in their closest relationships, in their working relationships, and even in everyday interactions that quietly shape how connected or how alone we feel. So, let's look at this in detail. Right. So, most relationships have an appreciation deficit. What do I mean? Um, Here, I want you to think about whether this exists in your relationships, in any of your relationships, okay, at home, at work, or both. So, the appreciation deficit is basically that in most ongoing relationships, there's an imbalance between how much we notice and name what is working, and how much we notice and name what is not working, okay? A lot of times the negativity gets raised, but the positive stuff, it gets assumed, right? Think about someone in your life who is consistently reliable, someone who always shows up, who does what they're going to, uh, who does what they say they are going to do, right? Does it without any drama, does it without needing to be chased. How often do you tell them, and very specifically tell them, that you notice that it matters to you, that your life is easier, better because of it, right? Or think about the person at home who keeps things running. Okay. The one who makes sure that there is food, or that the bills are paid, or that your home feels like home. When did you last name that? And not as a passing thank you, but as a genuine acknowledgement of what this means to you. Yeah. We assume that people know. Yeah, we a lot of times we just assume that whatever is positive goes without saying. But you know what? It does not go without saying for the person who is doing it, right? And a lot of times over time, the absence of that acknowledgement, it begins to feel like invisibility. Yeah. On the other side, being vocal about what you appreciate in someone can encourage more of that behavior, right? Like we discussed. And it's not just that because they're doing it out of performance or just to receive appreciation, but because when they are seen for something, it kind of reinforces that behavior. It tells them that, I notice what you're doing, I notice your who you are, and it matters to me, right? And that is one of the most connecting things one human being can offer. Now compare this to the alternative, criticism. Even when it is accurate, even when it is kind of intentional and well intentioned, even then it triggers defensiveness. You know why? Because when we criticize someone, the brain registers it as a threat. Okay, and when there is threat, people don't grow up, people don't grow, people don't open up. Instead, they protect themselves. Okay, they try to defend it. Yeah. On the other hand, appreciation creates conditions for people to feel safe enough to actually hear feedback when it does come, right? Because it tells them that they are more than their mistakes. So, this is not at all about avoiding hard conversations. In fact, it is about building a relational foundation that can make hard conversations possible. Yeah. So, I also want to spend a moment now on, what appreciation actually sounds like, because this is also where a lot of us get stuck, right? We think about that, of course, yes, we should appreciate people, we should express our gratitude to them, but also when we try, sometimes it comes out very vague. right? It doesn't land. And the difference here is specificity, being specific. Okay. So when you say, like, I appreciate you, right? Of course, it is very warm. You're at least acknowledging it, you know, but it's also very generic. All right. It's kind of like, the emotional equivalent of a thumbs up. Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah. So that's the feeling. It doesn't tell the person what you saw, what you noticed, why it mattered, right? So compare just saying, I appreciate you, to saying, I appreciated that you checked in on me yesterday without me asking, right? I was having a hard time and I hadn't said anything, and somehow you knew, right? It made me feel less alone. Okay. This is so different from just saying, I appreciate you. Because in this case, you are telling them what you saw, checking on me yesterday without me asking, right? What you noticed, that, I was having a hard day and I hadn't said anything, but somehow you knew it, right? And why it mattered, right? Because it made me feel less alone. And this is such a different experience because for the person who's receiving this, it says, I was paying attention, I saw you, and what you did actually impacted me. So that level of specificity is actually requires something from us. It requires what we actually notice, and not just a vague warmth, but paying close attention to name what happened and why it landed the way it did for us. And it's also a form of love, just paying attention to what someone does for us and telling it to them, right? So here I want you to, kind of take a moment to think about one person in your life right now. Okay. Someone who has done something recently that you appreciated but didn't fully say. Okay. So think about this one person with whom something like this has happened. And as we walk through the rest of this, I want you to hold them in your mind because by the end of today, I want you to have the language to say to them that they did something that mattered to you. Okay? Yeah. Just take a moment and think about someone, and we'll go ahead in a minute. I'll just see if there are any questions in the chat. Okay. All right. Let's proceed. Okay. So now we will be looking at something which is more difficult, right? Everything that we have talked about so far, which is about the experiments, about the neuroscience of it, about the relational angle, all of this also applies equally to how we treat ourselves. Okay, the words that we give ourselves and the way we speak to ourselves in the privacy of our own minds. So I just want to make this clear as well that yes, self compassion is harder. And for a lot of us, it is significantly harder. And if that is true for you, I don't want you to leave today feeling like you have failed at gratitude because you can't quite, extend it to yourself. So we will talk about why self-compassion is, self-appreciation is harder. And then we'll also talk about a gentler way in. Okay, there is a chat. So let's talk about the inner critic, right? So all of you know the inner critic, right? All of us probably have an inner critic, a voice or maybe a running commentary that is constantly evaluating us, judging us, replaying the mistakes that we make, whether in a meeting, whether while talking to someone, whether in a relationship, right? It just keeps going on. It tells us what we should have done, how we could have been more, how we could have handled it better. And it holds us to standards. At times, it holds us to standards that we would never apply to anyone else we love. Yeah. And for some of us, this voice is kind of occasional. It's like a background voice running behind, right? It is kind of manageable. But for a lot of others, and particularly for people who kind of grew up in environments where love was conditional on performance, or where criticism was the primary language of care, or where they learned early that they had to earn their place, that voice is not a guest. It is more of a permanent resident. Okay, it's like there, it's just there, you know. And the idea of speaking to themselves with warmth and appreciation in that case can not just feel difficult but also very dishonest. It's not something that they're used to at all. It's almost as if they're getting away with something. So what we can do in that case, or what I would suggest in that case would be to kind of start treating yourself with the same basic decency that you would extend to someone else you care about who is going through a struggling time. So, for example, if your closest friend came to you and said, I made a mistake today and I feel terrible about it, right? You would not tell them that, oh, what a foolish person you are, or you would not tell them that, oh, you're such a failure, right? You would not tell them what your inner critic says to you, right? You would not pile on. Maybe you would acknowledge their difficulty. Maybe you would offer your own perspective for them. Maybe you might even gently help them see what they can do differently, right? And you might probably do this from a place of warmth and not contempt. Yeah. So self-compassion is simply asking, right? Can I speak to myself in the same way as I would speak to someone else that I love? Okay. It's not pretending that you didn't make a mistake. It is not inflating your sense of your own abilities. And it is definitely not bypassing accountability. Okay. It's simply just giving yourself that space that you can offer to someone else who you love. And, you know, that grace, that decency of, that, yeah, you made a mistake. And, if it was someone else, I would be more understanding about it. Right. So just offering that same thing to yourself as well. And it might be so that right now, even that is difficult, right? And it doesn't come easy. It may not come easy right now, and that's okay as well, because that is where we can start. And let's talk about that now. Okay. So what can you do when self-compassion, self-appreciation, all of this is more difficult, right? So if self-compassion feels genuinely out of reach for you right now, let's not start there. We will start instead with others. Okay. So, for a lot of us, appreciation which is directed outward is far more accessible. It might feel more natural, less exposing, less complicated. But at the same time, it is still very neurologically, rationally, genuinely valuable. You're still going to be doing something real when you express appreciation for another person. And you're still training your brain to notice the positive. And you're still building the habit of closing the gap between what you feel and what you say. So, trying to start from appreciating outward rather than starting from inward, if that feels less accessible right now. Okay, it will help you build the skill, we can say, or the habit of actually noticing things which are positive, which you can, kind of express. Yeah. And as what happens next is, as you become more fluent in this language, as you become more fluent in the language of expressing your appreciation outwards, you'll notice gradually that something will begin to shift inward as well. Okay, and it might not be dramatic, it might not be immediate, but gradually, the habit of noticing and naming what is good, what is working, what is meaningful, what deserves acknowledgement, somehow you'll also start to include yourself in that radius. Yeah. You might start to notice something that you handled well. Yeah. Maybe how you would notice it with a friend. You might start to give yourself the same specific acknowledgement that you have been practicing for others. And it may not be as a performance of self love, but a way of, natural way of extending that same attention that you have been building for others. So, practice giving, and it might also teach you to receive. Yeah. And a lot of times, yes, it may not be a quick process. In fact, for some people, it might genuinely be therapeutic work, something which is needed to work with support. But it can begin very simply. It can begin with simply noticing and saying what you notice, right? So now let's look at how or what this looks like in practice. So here are two things that I want you to try this week. Um, First of all, for your relationships, we talked about having someone in mind, right? So I want you to find someone in your life who has done something recently that you have appreciated but not fully named. And then say it specifically. Okay. Tell them what they did, tell them why it mattered, and tell them what it meant to you. Okay. You don't have to make it a big moment. It can be just a text, a quiet conversation, a moment at the end of a day. But try to make it specific. Okay. Let them hear exactly what you say and try to do that. After you do, notice what happens. What this does, what saying or telling them about how this mattered to you, what it does to them. And in fact, not just to them, but what does it do for you? Okay. And notice the slight shift that happens when you close that gap, when you close that gap between just feeling something versus also saying out loud. Okay. So try this exercise for your relationship, for any one specific relationship. Right. And now for yourself, you can try the same specificity, but inwards. So not saying something like, I'm proud of myself, but saying something more honest, more grounded, something like, oh, I handled that difficult conversation better than I thought I would. Okay. Or, that situation was hard and I showed up anyway. Yeah. Or I noticed what someone needed today and I responded to it. So something very small, can be small, honest, real. And, you know, even if, it feels like that is something too big to start with right now, especially for yourself, you can always start with others, give that appreciation outward, and let yourself get fluent in noticing what is good before you try to turn that attention to yourself. Both of the directions are very important and they matter. And wherever you feel more comfortable is the right place to begin. The only thing I want to ask here for you is to not wait until you can do it perfectly. Okay, because what we feel and what we say, this gap doesn't close on its own, and it needs small imperfect moments where you start genuinely saying what you feel to close that gap, right? So today we started with a very simple observation that you notice more than you say. And I hope this webinar has given you a little more understanding of why that gap exists, why the brain defaults to the negative, why criticism feels more urgent than appreciation, and why we assume that the positive goes without saying when it so often doesn't. So I hope it gives you a sense of what is possible when you start closing that gap. Of course, not positively, not perfectly, but and not at all at once, but gradually and genuinely. So this isn't about becoming someone who expresses constant positivity or performs gratitude as a wellness practice. It is actually very much simpler, right? It is basically about letting more of what you genuinely feel, actually make it out. So make it out in form of words, make it out into the room, into the ears of the people who need to hear it. And eventually, not just the people who need to hear it, but also it can find your way into the way that you speak to yourself, right? So yeah, that's all what this is about, because the people in your life, they deserve to hear what they mean to you, and so do you. So yeah, that's all from my end, and let's just look at few reflections that you can take away from today's session. So is there someone you have been meaning to appreciate and haven't? Maybe you can try the exercise we talked about. Is there something that you did recently that you haven't acknowledged in yourself? Maybe you can try to do that as well. And just reflecting on what would it feel like to close the gap between what you feel and what you express just a little this week. So yeah, that is all I have for today. And if you have any questions, the floor is now open and I'm here to take those. I don't see any on the chat.
Right. So, if anyone has any question, thoughts, or reflection, they can type it down, and Ms. Simran will take it up as well. So, before we conclude this webinar, I would like to thank everyone for joining us and being part of this meaningful conversation. And it has given us a better understanding of the psychology of appreciation, right? How expressing can positively influence our relationship with ourselves and others as well, right? Like Ms. Simran said. And thank you, Ms. Simran, for sharing your expertise and valuable insight with us today, and your perspective and your strategy as well in understanding of emotional well-being, and helping us recognize what is the importance of cultivating appreciation in our everyday lives, right? Like a simple text can also work. It doesn't have to be something huge, but um, just sharing with it with your loved ones, right? So before we sign off, Ms. Simran, you can show us our platform and your packages as well and your profile. So everyone, we encourage you to explore positivity, our platform, and if you're looking for, professional mental health support, so you can go through positivity.
So yeah, this is my profile on Positivity. You can search for Simran Sakshi and you can book a session with me if you want. You can also explore various packages that I have as well. There are packages on, finding and conducting emotional regulation. There are packages which are around, burnout. If you're going through burnout or over functioning and you want support, you can explore if this package works for you. Similarly, for self criticism, for self worth, there is also a package for relationship patterns. So you can understand your relationship patterns, your attachment wounds through this package, and explore ways to walk around it. For crisis, there is another package on crisis. Um, there's also a package which kind of is more about direction finding. So a lot of times we don't know what we want to do in therapy, but we know that we're stuck somewhere. So this is a package that can be useful at that particular time. If you feel very demotivated right now and you want to rebuild functioning, this is another package. Mm, this is also a specific package which is for only women, because a lot of times we are seen as emotional and we have strong emotion. We feel we have strong emotions and we want space for it. We need space for it. And this is a space to, to look at your emotions and to learn how to manage and regulate yourself. Finally, there is a package on marriage decision counseling, because marriage is one of the most important decisions that you make in your life, and it is so important to find clarity before you make that commitment. So you can come and you can, if you are looking for clarity, if you're looking for understanding what marriage means to you, understanding your fears, your relationship patterns, maybe the expectations you carry, and what a healthy partnership may look like. This might be a great place to explore that. This might be a great package to explore it. Usually have 6 sessions in it, and we start with where you're right now, what the situation that you are in, and what is the process, what is happening with you. And then we move into understanding what you want from the marriage, and what you have been told to want because of all the background and all the conditioning that we have in our culture. And we also explore your fears, your doubts, your relationship patterns. And we try to explore how and help you with how you can navigate your family expectations, difficult conversations, setting boundaries, expressing your needs. Then we can explore on what a healthy partnership might look for you, so that you know what you're looking for and you can kind of move ahead with whatever works for you. And finally, your path kind of may feel clearer after the sessions, because some new questions may have surfaced, or you might have discovered something that feels more aligned to you. And that is the hope of this whole package, that whatever decision you kind of go forward and make, you make it is more intentional rather than pressured. So yeah, if you're looking for something like this is the package that you can sign up for.
Right. So, thank you, Simran, for this lovely, you know, lovely your lovely package and showing what it does, what is your theme, and how you will help people around, and who is it for. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We have put up our socials as well, our LinkedIn, our website, and our Instagram as well. So make sure to do follow that and stay connected with us. See our YouTube lives as well for our past webinars as well. And we love to have you join us for our upcoming webinars as well. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and thank you for joining.
Thank you everyone.